Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for another Success Case webinar. I'm Tony Slava, Product Marketing Manager for Xray, and today you're going to see a presentation from a customer that's been using Xray to enable even non-technical team members to contribute to quality. We're going to be joined by Filip Baert, who is a test manager at Cegeka, and he's going to share why they chose Xray for their test management and how they've been using Xray to manage testing both in-house and for all of their client projects. Keep in mind that throughout the presentation, you're able to submit questions, and afterwards we'll have a 15-minute Q&A where we'll also be joined by Xray product owner, and together we'll be able to answer the questions that you have for us. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass the word over to you, Filip. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. So indeed, today I will talk about Cegeka and my role, but also what we did before we used Xray, how our testing and QA processes look like, and of course, which features and reports we use mostly, and ending with the takeaway and some benefits on Xray. So first, a couple of words about Cegeka. Cegeka is a Belgian-based company. It's in fact a digital holding of quite a number of companies in the meantime, where we try to do everything on data applications, but also things like 5G with City Mesh. And I am part of the one in the white chip in the middle, the Cegeka Business Solutions. So some facts and figures. We're doing about 750 million euros turnover per year with over 2,500 happy customers. And in the meantime, almost 6,000 employees. The company is 30 years old this year, and we are still a family-owned company with presence of, I think, 12 European countries in the meantime. We also have two high performance and redundant data centers located in Belgium and the Netherlands. I am present in the business solutions department, and there we're trying to implement ERP systems with our customers built on Dynamics 365 from Microsoft. So this is ERP, but also CRM, HR, and even low-code apps. Those are always quite big projects, very international. So just to give a bit of a way on how or what we are doing at the moment. So my typical project where I come as a test manager is on one of these ERP implementations of our customers. And the project typically takes about 1 year. Some go a little bit more, some take a little bit less. But quite often also very international. So most of the customers have either headquarter in Belgium or somewhere in Europe, but they have other locations throughout the whole world. Typically for these companies is that they are not IT or software companies. They are companies which produce things like food, medicine, metal works, things like that, but almost never IT companies. So that means that my typical business user, my typical tester, is also not an IT guy. So they are real experts in their job, but not experts in IT. And on top of that, they have never ever written a test case in their life. Also, as I said, they are globally spread, and that means quite often that I never get to see them in real life. Often they are targeted remotely, because indeed we have business users varying from Australia through Europe, through Africa, South America, and the USA. So that makes my life even a bit more hard. So what do I do on these projects? I'm mainly busy with these business users. So I educate them on testing. I make sure they are enthusiastic about testing, because that's quite often not the case. Afterwards, I will follow up on their actions while they are preparing testing or doing test execution. I facilitate everything when it comes to testing, but I also do end reporting towards steering committees or project management. I typically take 2 to 3 projects in parallel in one given week. So I combine a couple of projects at the same time. It's never a full-time job, my test management on one project. So our initial challenges. 4 years ago, I joined Cegeka because indeed there were challenges that needed to be addressed. So we have like 15 projects in parallel going on in Belgium, the Netherlands, and our other countries. And they all acted in their specific way. They had their own way of working when it comes to testing. We have testing on the Cegeka side. So the Cegeka people will test their customizations, and there the general way of working was a Scout's honor. So if they asked to the consultant, did you test your customizations? They said, yeah, I promise I tested them and everything looked okay. No tracing of what was tested, when it was tested, whether it was wrong or right, nothing. On the customer side, it was even worse. So worst case, on the customer side, there was really nothing. And by nothing, I mean they didn't do a thing. So nothing was tested, nothing was tried. So also nothing to provide as evidence. And of course, if you go live with a project like this, this is not okay at all. Best case, the customer came up with some homemade Excel with test titles in it. I will not show these Excel. We all know how they look like. You have 15, 20 or more columns, and somewhere at the right-hand side, you have a column that says pass or fail, or pass with restrictions, or whatever you want. Quite hard to manage. Some of the key users do follow that, other key users didn't. Nobody likes it, so that's best case, but even still, it's a worst case. So in both, the result was that we have failing projects. So this is the challenge. 4 years ago, many of the projects came into trouble at the end of the project simply because no testing was done, or the testing was at a very low level, which was hardly sufficient to get something correct. So then I came in, and they asked me to get some maturity in the way we do things. And of course, with that, the correct tooling needed to be selected. So with that in mind, knowing which projects we have, how many projects we have, and the type of business users that we have, we needed to make a selection. And of course, selection comes with restrictions. So the request of Cegeka was, please, please, please do not add an additional tool. We already had Jira for our running projects to follow up the projects, follow up the scope and everything, but we never did testing with it. So in the past, I already worked with a couple of tools which were not in Jira. So I quite knew well what I wanted and what I did not want. My personal requests were that it needed to be easy to use and easy to understand by these non-IT business users. That was the main thing. It needed to be easy. But also, I need visibility on coverage because we're not, we're talking about projects here, projects. And so this is not about product development. So I don't have dedicated testers which will grow over the years and build up a nice test library. And these testers, they know what they're doing. They know which test they need to write. No, I have business people and they need some guidance on why they need to create test cases. So I need coverage, I need requirements, and I need coverage for that. But also I need a one-click status overview. Over the past years, many times I had a request, please send me the status of the progress of the testing. This is something I didn't want anymore. So I need one page, one dashboard, or one view where everyone can see what the status is of the testing and what the progress is of the testing. So that was very important. But also, a tool should be, for me as an administrator, very easy to set up, but also fast to set up. So with good defaults, not too many different parameters to set up, so I can quickly start. So all of that I found in Xray. And during the first tryouts that we did, of course, I had some questions, I had some troubles, and I needed to be fair, the customer support of Xray is excellent. They helped me really fast and with accurate details on how to move next. So there we go. We chose for Xray a little over 3 years ago, and gradually we're growing more and more in using this tool. So on testing and QA processes, how do we manage our testing and our QA? So first, when we start up a new project, we have to configure our Jira, of course. And for every project that we start at a customer, we create 2 Jira projects. One where the Cegeka side is responsible for, and one where the customer is responsible for. And the Cegeka project, that contains the whole scope and the project follow-up on what they deliver to the customer. There also the individual customization testing is performed. So the Cegeka consultants create test cases, execute test cases for specific customizations that they built for this customer. That project also contains the requirements that are used by the customer. So we have a split off here. The customer project is for testing. The Cegeka project is for the requirements when it comes to business testing. So the customer project is only there for this business-oriented testing. How this is created? Well, with Python, we created a script and we automatically create the 2 projects. We create a set of filters every time, and we also create a number of dashboards that I will show later on. So this means that automatically, I am sure that all the projects that we start have a good and decent and the same view on testing every time. So for me, that's also very relaxing that I know that everything works according to my specification. When the Jira projects are set up, we can start. So the very first thing I need to do is make sure that I train my business users. As I said, they never created a test case in their life. So I need to make sure that they know a thing or two about test techniques. What does a good test case look like? What is a test case that I would like to see? And what is a bad test case? But also, if they found issues later on, problems, how to log a well-documented defect. They should have a reproducible scenario, should be linked to a test case, all these things. And then we have a complete walkthrough in the system. So that means this is a workshop where the whole team logs into Jira, starts creating dummy test cases we execute them together, and of course we fail the test case and we create a dummy defect. This is to make sure that they did it at least once, and also to show that they don't need to be afraid of this system. Because if you never used Jira before, it can become quite, it looks complicated, but it isn't. So I make sure that they really learn how to use the system step by step. So that's the training. And then we really start with the testing part. Typically, our projects are spread over 3 big waves, and each wave contains 3 sprints, and every sprint is about 3 or 4 weeks, depending on one project to another. So near the end of every sprint, the customer key users receive a handover of a new feature that was implemented for them. So what they need to do then is they need to practice, of course, this new feature. Using exploratory testing, they just browse around and see what they can do. The idea is also that they, at that moment, create good test cases. Right? These should be business-oriented test cases with their specific data variants. So at that time, they don't execute it yet. The execution is done only after every 3 sprints. Why? Because by then the scope is big enough to do more end-to-end testing. So in an ERP system, the idea is that you will have to work together. So one colleague from sales will sell an item, but that means that another colleague will need to produce this item. So we need to work together to make the full cycle complete. In this way, we will try to execute all these test cases that were prepared during an official test execution. We call it a key user validation test, a CUVT. Of course, from CUVT 2 onwards, we will need to do some regression testing from the previous cycle. So this we do more or less 3 times on every project. At the end of the project, of course, we still do a user acceptance test, but there we have a more broad audience. So our KUVT testing is still done with a small group of 30, 25, 30 people within the organization. The user acceptance can be done with 300, 400 people, meaning nearly everyone in the organization. And then we go live with the system, then the project ends. But of course, afterwards, during a maintenance period of the next years, regression testing can be done using these very same test cases that we prepared in the course of the project. So, an overview of the most used features. We only do manual testing. So test automation is not in scope for us. We do manual testing, but we want to use always well-described test steps. So every business user that there is will write all these test steps manually. I try not to import test cases or steps with the CSV importer. I'd rather have them write them in Jira itself. So what we use a lot is, of course, these coverage graphs and reports. In the next slide, I'll show in 2 slides, I'll show the dashboards. What we also use is the document generator, and that one we use specifically for the pharmaceutical sector, where we need official result output as an evidence that we performed the test case, and preferably on paper. every screenshot, every step that is being executed, it contains an actual result with a screenshot that we see during that step. So on the screenshots that I show you here, it's part of such a report where the evidence column gives a small screenshot every time, and in the pages afterwards, there you can see a screenshot which is page filling every time. So per step we have one page, resulting in, for instance here, 108 pages for only a couple of test cases. So that we use very extensively for the pharmaceutical sector. Of course, also the dashboard gadgets, we use them a lot, and we depend a lot on them. And then the last one, maybe a funny one, it's the copy test steps from another test case. That we use a lot as well. So why is that? Because for one process that we want to test, we'll have some data variants, and those test cases will look a lot like each other, but never 100% the same. So the idea is then that they create one test case with a nice set of test steps. And if that is finished, they just copy the steps to the other test cases and make modifications depending on the data that they select. That's also why we don't use the dataset feature, because the dataset feature will require you to have more or less the same steps every time, and then every single data entry, different data, but same steps. So that's not the case with us. So there's always a slightly different step, one step more, one step less, or something else. What we also don't use is the call to another test feature. And that's mainly because this complicates writing test cases and is also harder to explain to my business users. So in the beginning, I said it needed to be very easy to explain. If you introduce things like the call to another test case, well, then it makes your test procedure more complex, and at least half of my business users don't understand how that feature works. So that's why we don't use these things. What I personally also use a lot is JQL and the Jira, the Xray JQL used for control lists. Mainly to control or to check my own actions, but also to check the actions of the business users. An example of my own actions is a list of test cases that is not yet in a test plan. So in the beginning, that's okay, and that list will grow every time. But once I schedule everything to be executed in such a key user validation test, the resulting list should be empty because all tests should be planned. Same for tests not in any test execution. A test case which is not present in a test execution, it will never be executed, so it will not become red or green. So we should avoid that. The list of open bugs found during testing, of course, that's an interesting one, because you see it growing, you see it reducing again if the bugs are fixed, and the aim is there just to see how bad the quality of the system is, depending on the size of this list. But also, we have a list of failed test cases which may be able to be retested based on the linked bug, the status of that bug. This is not 100% bulletproof, but at least it gives a list of test cases that can potentially be retested. For me, that's a list where I will select the test cases, put them again in a test execution, and assign it to one of my key users. The last one is an interesting one just to check my key users. If they fail a test case, the agreement is that they always link a defect to it, because if they don't link a defect, no defect will be fixed, and then we will never be able to retest the test case. So that one gives a list of test cases and names where I will be able to go to the key user and say, okay, please add a defect to this particular test case on that test run, so we can verify what happened. This is the dashboard, the testing dashboard that is generated for every project that we have. On the left-hand side, we have the gadgets with the green arrow, with green bar. Those are everything about requirements. So we teach our business users, left-hand side is where you start. This is what you need to test. Please go to the specific process in our case and start creating test cases from there. The top one is a matrix on coverage. So the idea is that before we start a testing cycle, every one of this list should at least be yellow, because if we have uncovered requirements, that means we will not test them. So the group aim is to cover everything before we start our testing cycle. On average, in every project, we have about 250 requirements, which are implemented in the course of indeed more or less 9 or 10 months. On the right-hand side, we have everything about test executions and test cases. So on top, they know if we want to start test execution, this is the list of our open test executions. So I always make sure that they recognize their test execution, meaning it's for a specific domain which they are responsible for. You see quality, you see production, you see finance, they recognize these titles. The system is also created in such a way that test executions which are completed, everything is red or green, the status changes automatically to resolved, and these items are removed from this list. So the aim here in a testing cycle is to make this list completely empty, because when a test execution is finished, it's removed. So making it empty is our target. Each and every one receives one or more test executions, and they all know what to do. If you look down a bit, you see the last one stating my assigned test cases and the one just above my created test cases. We make sure that they find their own work pretty easy, because in total, they will create over 1,500 test cases as the whole group. So if you need to search for your own test cases every time by a specific filter or just looking for them, that's not going to work. So that's why we created these topics where you always see my created tests. So in this case, you can see the ones assigned to me as a person. If one of my key users is logging into Jira, they see their own test cases. Just to make sure that it is easy for them to find everything. More to the bottom of this dashboard, there is also an overview on execution progress, but also on these control lists that I showed in the previous slide. So everything is on one nice dashboard, everything concerning testing. What we also have is a specific key user dashboard. For some people, the previous dashboard was still too much. They saw way too much information. So that's why we created a key user dashboard. And this is a very personal dashboard, because everything you see here starts with my. So assigned to me, my assigned test cases, my assigned requirements, my assigned test executions. So you only see these items which are in fact assigned to you, meaning this is what you need to work on. On top, we have the test runs that you still need to do. On the right-hand side, you have on top the test runs that you already did. So also there you can track again, what did I do lately? So at the bottom, they also see the test executions assigned to them. So when the list or the dashboard is too much, the previous dashboard, this one is a very concise dashboard specifically for them. And in my dashboard, it gives quite a lot. For an average key user, there is a little information on this page, which is good because that means they have little to do. A next feature that we use a lot is the test repository. The test repository that you see here contains 1,100 test cases. It's from an actual customer from us. I use this a lot, but I do not explain this to my business users, and I do not even mention this to my business users. And why is that? Because they simply don't use it. I use this. I have, yet again, a Python script that will move all these test cases automatically from the orphans folder to the correct folder in the test repository, which folder is based on a specific field on the requirement where the test case is linked to. And then I use this, of course, to build up my test plan and my test executions. So the structure here is very domain-based, domain and subdomain based. So we have a logistics warehouse and distribution right here with in total 109 test cases. So if we are starting or preparing the test execution cycle, I sit together with the responsible person for logistics, and then we go over all these folders, which ones we need to execute, which ones we don't need to execute. Of course, I have yet another filter on the right-hand side of the repository where the test list is, where I can see or filter on test cases which are never executed. So that means that now we need to execute them because they were new. Then I look for the ones which were failed in the past. Maybe we can retest them now. But also out of the remaining test cases, which ones were actually executed but have been updated since then, and we need to retest them because they have 5 steps more. So my business users need to help me on that one as well. But also a couple of test cases which did not change. Maybe we need to take them as regression tests. And then I create folder by folder. So on inquiries, on storage, on manufacturing logistics, I create test executions and I add them to the test plan. So that means, as you can see, already a couple, like 10 for logistics, and for all the other domains, I have an equal amount of subfolders, always with not that high amount of test cases. So that's what I use the test repository for, but I use it, not the business users. So then I come to my test plan. So I create my test plan based on my test repository. And in this case, the test plan contains 805 test cases, which may seem a lot, but I have 35 testers to execute that. I have a lot of test executions, 110 test executions in total to be executed by those 35 business users. They are based on the folders and subfolders in the test repository. But what I always try to do is make sure that one test execution is being executed by one tester. So I can assign my test execution to one person, and he or she is responsible to execute these test cases in total. But also, on average, each test case, so every one of those 805 test cases, is located in 2 test executions. So in total, I will have about 1,600, 1,700 test runs. And why do we do that? Well, mainly for three reasons. For the 4I principle, just to make sure that everything is tested by at least 2 people, to be sure, but also for training purposes. I have 3 business users for the logistics domain, and they all created a couple of test cases, and together they created everything. But they did never execute the test cases written by their colleagues. So at this moment in time, we will just have all 3 of them execute all these test cases just to train them. But also we have international customers. So we have key users in Belgium. They have to execute the test case, but we also have key users in France. They will execute the very same test case, but with their local data. So we have one test case, 2 locations, so executed twice. So I need to follow up on all these test executions separately. And then, of course, when things start to fail and things get fixed, I also have a couple of retesting test executions because it is forbidden for them to put a red test run to green, because then I lose my tracking. And they know that. So as to conclude, as key takeaways and benefits, I have 4. So first is maturity and trust. It was important for us that the system that we use is quite quickly acceptable and accepted by the steering committees and the project members and project managers of our customers. So typically, if I show our dashboards to a new customer or a prospect, it literally takes me 15 minutes before they say, yep, that's what we're going to use. So mission accomplished there. So it very easily and very fast gives away maturity and trust towards all our stakeholders. And that's what we really needed. It is also easy to explain. As you saw, the different domains that we have, I have business users in logistics, warehousing. That means that actually people working in the warehouse are my key users. They have computer allergies, but still I am able to have them test cases created and executed. So it's easy to explain. If I can drag along these people, I can drag along everyone, and then mission accomplished. As a third one, Xray is part of Jira, and I can use all the abilities and Jira powers. We rely also on other add-ons like Script Runner. If you combine the Script Runner with the with the Xray power, when it comes to filtering, when it comes to dashboards, you have an extremely powerful tool set. And then last but not least, metrics and graphs. They were important for me during the selection. They are important for me during my my project execution, and I just have everything right there what I need. I don't need to extract everything to Excel to produce some additional graphs or progress reports. I simply don't need that. I have everything right there in my dashboards on my my test plan, and everyone can look at it. So that also means for the first topic, the trust. Everyone, all my stakeholders, my project managers and the steering committee, they can see all the data and the graphs in real time themselves. I can never lie on the progress. I can never make it appearing more or better looking than it is. They simply can see themselves how the system is doing. So the trust there is very important for us. And that concludes more or less the way we are using Xray within Cegeka.
Philip, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really a pleasure to hear a very unique use case that you have and how you've been using Xray and really customized and adapted it for your needs. So thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
Great. And now we have some questions, so let's move on to answer some of the questions that we have in the Q&A chat.